So you started KKR in 1976 using your and your partner's initial own money or capital. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you got started? Why did you start this really interesting new type of business, and what motivated you?
Well, we got started actually in what is now known as the alternative investment area while we were at Bear Stearns. Jerry Kohlberg, George Roberts, and I were at Bear Stearns and bought our first company really in 1969, I believe, and sort of came about because a man came to see Jerry, who he knew, and said, I got a problem. And the problem is I've got a private company called Stern Metals, made dental equipment, and I don't want to go public. I don't want to sell the business. And by the way, I have a son who I don't think is capable of running the business. What do I do? And Jerry came up with the thought, well, why don't we form a group to buy the company? You keep 25%, we'll buy 75%, and we'll take care of your son so you don't have to have that burden. And that was the first deal we did. That was in 1969. We bought a number of companies in the 60s through Bear Stearns. Now, you have to understand, Bear Stearns never put a penny into any deal we did. They hated what we did. They were a sales and trading firm. And for them, long-term was overnight. For us, 5 to 10 years was long-term, and that's really what we wanted. We left the firm in 1976, and George and I were 32. We didn't have any money. And Jerry was older. George and I, first cousins, we each put up $10,000 to start KKR, and Jerry, being 19 years older, put up $100,000. So we started with $120,000, went out to raise a $25 million fund. You got to understand, there were no funds in those days, nobody doing what we were doing, and we couldn't raise money on terms that made sense. We dealt with a prudential insurance company, Mass Mutual, and but our idea was we saw a discrepancy in the market for companies, and that was boards of directors were not holding managements accountable. Institutions weren't doing much either except owning the stock, and companies were in the 1970s and the early 80s were really poorly run, and we felt that we could buy companies. And if you tie in management and make them an owner, as opposed to, I call it a renter of the corporate asset, actually make them an owner, they're going to act differently. And they're going to have the same interest in mind that the shareholders have in mind. So you have to have an alignment of interest between management and the shareholders. And our idea, Elad, was we thought we could buy companies and make them better, and that was our whole premise when we got started, and that's what we've done. But when we got started, you could buy a company maybe 7, 8 times earnings. Today, you're paying 15, 20 times earnings or more. So, and in those days, I'll give you an example. A company you all will know is Safeway. So, in 1985. We bought Safeway for $5.6 billion. We put up $126 million out of the $5.6 billion, and that was for 100% of the equity. And that was called leverage. So you had $5.4 billion or $5.5 billion in round numbers of debt and $126 million of equity. At one point, we actually made, on a sale we made in the public markets, we had taken it private, then took it back public, we actually made about 50 times our money. Those are venture kind of returns. Now, what did we do? When we bought the company, everybody said, you guys are crazy. You can't buy a retail company. You got 1% margins. There's not much you can do with a company like that. Well, we found a terrific management team, which was actually the team that was part of our consulting group within KKR. We had our own consulting group in KKR. They went in to run the company. They took margins from 1% to 9%. And for a grocery store chain, it's incredible. Probably too high, quite frankly. but they knew where to spend the money. And of course, there was no AI in those days. And so that you could lever a company to, just to put it in perspective. So today, if you buy a company, I don't care how hard you work at it, you still have to pay probably 15 times earnings for the company on average. You might be able to get the equity or debt, let's say, 7 times debt to EBITDA. So the rest of it, you're going to have to put in equity. So what went from 126 million, today you would have to put in probably $3 billion of equity. So that has really changed from where we were. Now, why did we get started? First of all, we saw this discrepancy in the market, and we really believed that we could make companies much better. And that's been our premise all along. But I want to back up for a minute, because something very important. When Jerry, George, and I had our very first meeting as KKR, May 1st, 1976, we had 2 conversations. First conversation was how to divide the economics. That was a 35-second conversation. Jerry, you take 40%, you're putting up 100,000, and George and I'll each take 30. And when we hire anybody else and give them equity, the first 10 points will come from you, Jerry, until we're even, and we'll come down after that. That was easy. The second part was just as easy. We came out of an environment at Bear Stearns, which was an eat what you kill culture, and we hated it. Everybody ran around and said, my idea, my deal. I literally, no kidding, had to lock my desk drawer at night, even though I was a partner at the firm, because I found people would come in, rummage around, see what I was working on, because you were only paid on what you worked on or what you did. We hated that. So we wanted a firm exactly the opposite. We wanted a firm where everybody participated in everything we did, whether you're a partner at the firm or you were not a partner, whether you worked on a deal or you didn't work on it, whether you brought it in or you didn't bring it, it didn't matter. And the reason was very simple, because if we got the best thought process from the entire firm to help us, we thought we would do much better. So 49 and a half years later, we have exactly the same culture, except rather than having 3 of us, we now have 5,000 employees and 28 offices around the world, and not $120,000, but over $700 billion of assets under management, 45 different products. So got started really because we had an idea, and there was nobody doing it, that we could make companies better.